majority.
Yo, what up, y'all? Welcome to Majority Report. We've got a special edition episode today. We've got
special edition.
Yeah, the founder himself, Omid Farhang.
What up?
Thank you for making time for us today. As you can see, we've got a condensed crew today. We were laughing off camera. It's like, it's a really good problem to have because everybody wanted to be here, but there's a lot of work happening here, a lot of good things happening here. So we were like, yo, we'll just hold it down. It'll be a dude cast today. And
very rare, I would say. It's
very rare. But yeah, shout out to C, OJ, Cherie. And yeah, thanks, Omid.
They got better things to do, man. This is low priority content, and I appreciate that they're where they need to be.
You know,
they're holding us down. Thank you.
Yeah. So
thank you, ladies. Thank you.
With that in mind, man, if we could kick things off, I mean, people should know a lot about your career, but if there's anything you can give us in terms of like a quick intro of like how you even got to the point of starting Majority.
Yeah, sure. I think, man, where you start has a kind of reverberating effect on your career in ways that you can't always anticipate. For me, I started at an agency called Crispin Porter Bogusky in the early 2000s. I like telling people that because marketers under 40 don't know what I'm talking about, and then marketers sort of over 45, treat that agency with a certain reverence because it really sort of owned the early 2000s, and it was the only place I wanted to work. And it was a place that taught me work ethic, and it taught me my creative taste, and it taught me about creative ambition, and it taught me how to dream big. And so these are these things that when you're at a certain agency, maybe in your early career, you assume, hey, this is kind of how it works everywhere. And then you start to get out into the industry and work at different jobs, and you go, oh my God, like there was a certain work ethic and taste that was infusing into my bloodstream at that place that is going to stay with me my entire career. And so that was the place for me. And so like, that's not something that we take lightly when we hire someone who's new to our company. Like I'm thinking about that when we hire people that, hey, what goes for me goes for, people who are entering the advertising space through the portal of Majority is like, what are we teaching that's getting in your DNA, that's shaping your taste, that will ultimately shape your career? And so, that's part of how we think about, what we want the legacy of the company to be is when people leave here and go to other jobs, what are the fundamentals or the principles that they're taking from here that they can lean on as they navigate the remainder of their career.
Speaking of legacy, it's great that we just hit our 5-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Here at Majority. So did you just get some of your thoughts and
yeah.
feelings, like looking back on the nostalgia of the last 5 years? What does that look like for you?
Man, I don't know what it says about the fact that it really snuck up on us. Like someone told me that a couple weeks ago, and I feel like I should be feeling more sentimental than I am, but it just speaks to the fact that there's a lot of exciting things going on right now, and it almost feels like the best way to sort of honor the past is to, really deliver on the things that are on our plate right now. That, I mean, we're in a business that you really are kind of only as good as the last thing that you've done, and it's not lost on me that there are incredible small agencies that were around, that were winning awards and that were generating press and that were inspiring the industry one year, and then they lost their way, got a little bit lazy, got a little bit complacent, and a couple years later they're not around anymore. And so it's always just that balancing that contradiction of like, taking the time to stop and celebrate. It is a huge deal. Starting a company and staying alive, much less thriving, of any kind for 5 years is a huge accomplishment that is shared by many at this company, and I could not have done alone. And it starts with the two partners who I started this company with, Asmir and Jorge, and thinking about the formation of a team. When I wanted to start the company, my first thought was like, well, I would be the sort of ECD, and then the first few hires I wanted to make, there was all these like very senior creative people. Mm-hmm. And I talked to my boss from Crispin Porter, the agency I was telling you about where I started out. I was like, hey, I'm thinking that I'll be the ECD, and I'm gonna, we'll spend all our money on like these 3 creatives, and that'll be the company.
Yeah.
It's quite naive. And he's like, you might want to think about hiring partners who either do what you can't or won't want to do so that you guys aren't redundant. And so, you know, like, I think as I think about the math of me and Jorge and Asmir and what we each bring to the table, you know, what each one is good at, the other person, it tends to be a set of skills that the other two either can't or don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that has a real sort of compounding effect.
It's been really beautiful to watch the three of y'all like work between each other and move the work in such a way that like it's getting client recognition, it's getting word recognition. The way that you all have been very good at moving the company throughout the last 5 years, I think is something to be extremely commendable.
Dude, it's
great.
You know, business relationships are just like marriages and just like valuable friendships. When you stop talking, when you let resentments fester, when you stop being honest with each other, when you avoid conflict, when you lose the ability to address conflict in a civil and productive manner, you know, the relationship deteriorates. Most companies go out of business because of suicide, not because of homicide.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes the company enjoys success and the founders fight over who gets credit, you know, who should be the face of it, who should give the speech, who, you know, sometimes the company fails and it's, you know, it devolves into finger pointing. So like, you know, there's this sort of like samurai saying of how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think maybe probably the most resounding lesson of starting a company is just like how you run a company and how you interact with your business partners is how you operate in your marriage, and how you interact with your partner is how you parent your children, and what kind of parent you want to be is how you, you know, value your friendships and cultivate, you know, new friendships and existing friendships. It's kind of all the same thing.
Yeah.
To that effect, curious to know, especially with all that context, what's been kind of like your proudest moment? Like, is there a big win that stands out, even if it's not a campaign? Just something that kind of just lets you know, like, we really did this shit.
Getting to this moment was a series of events that in the moment we knew were important. But as I look back on them in hindsight, I'm more nervous looking back at those moments and what was at stake than I was in those moments. And that's probably just the compartmentalization of, hey, we're going to launch a company and you know you want to generate press. And guy dislikes boss and wants to start an agency is not a very good headline that the press would cover. You know, so I was like, well, you know, what would generate press? Well, it'd be very helpful to have the right celebrity partner who would give us the gift of letting us trade on their reputation and bringing attention that we might be able to convert into some client interest. You know, so for us that was Shaq, and he gave us that gift. But you know, so like when I'm on the phone with Shaq 5.5 years ago and his partner, you know, I'm not like, it's not helpful to bring into that conversation the energy of like, and if you say no, you know, that I'm just going to have to go back to this job that I don't like, you know, so like, again, sort of compartmentalizing. But as I reflect on that call, you know, the first call with the first client who gave us a project, the first pitch for an AOR account, you know, where we were up against some much bigger agencies and we converted that into, and like all of these moments add up to sort of success begetting success, you know, projects turning into AOR relationships, you know, creating unignorable work that makes another client maybe want to call you and say, hey, I saw that headline about you and Shaq, and like, you know, celebrity agencies come and go. You know, usually you get the press release about the celebrity and then you never see any work. You know, and the celebrity loses interest, you know, for a month they think they want to be in marketing, and then like it's time to go shoot Sinners, and like I don't want to do a call with Pepsi, you know. So like, you know, so like we were very cognizant of the fact that we could only trade on Shaq's reputation for so long, and we had to quickly convert that into, we need to start trading on our own reputation as an agency that makes the type of work that people want to. If you want to make that kind of work, then give us a call and maybe we can make that for you as well. But I might summarize my answer to your question about the moments along the way. When we were starting the agency, I reached out to all of these famous agency founders and just said, hey, I'd like to share my idea with you. And I'm not even really looking for anything in return. If you have advice, I'll take it. If you have a response, I'll take it. Mm-hmm. But over and over again, whether it was people who were really generous with their time, David Droga was one, my old boss, Alex Bogusky was one, Anselmo Ramos was one, Keith Cartwright was one, where especially those guys who had really made it to the mountaintop, when I was telling them what we were doing, I could see this longing in their eyes about where I was in my journey at the beginning. And they were talking with great kind of romance about this idea of like, the exhilaration of starting something, not knowing whether it would succeed or not, and sort of over and over again, I noticed, man, they keep talking so romantically about, entering into this endeavor with the fear of not knowing what would happen. Mm-hmm. So I told Jorge and Asmir at the beginning, I said, listen, I keep observing this. And so what we should take from that is, they look back at where we're at right now as the best part. So this is the best part. Yeah. And when we get our first client, this is the best part. And when we lose our first client, this is the best part. And when we hire our first employee, this is the best part. And when our first employee gets some recognition in the press, or one of us, when the agency wins an award, this is the best part. And when we have a high expectation about a piece of work that will win an award and we're disappointed, this is like, and so let's start thinking about all of these moments along this first leg of the journey as the best part. And that, again, I think maybe that took some pressure off, or that just helped bring a spirit of gratitude to what we were doing that served us through the first chapters of the agency.
It's crazy because even like working here, I've been here 3 years. So I'm
doing this podcast is the best part, you guys. Shit.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for even letting us do this. Because it's been fruitful for us too. Even just like you said, so y'all don't know, but like Omid kind of gave us like this speech one time. I think it was at a retreat. He just talked about like all the things you find at work, whether it's lifelong friends, et cetera, et cetera. And we all kind of really locked in with each other as friends, just doing this podcast. But even to that effect, like being here 3 years and seeing the growth of like, us starting. And when I came, it was maybe like 20 people at like the gathering spot. Then we moved to like WPP, and then it gets bigger. And even a lot of those wins you kind of mentioned along the way, like primarily working on Sprite, like seeing like, okay, we're getting this kind of work, but then now it's like this kind of work, and then now it's this. And I don't know, I think just seeing all that, it seems surreal at times. Like, it's like, man, like granted, it's like I'm like a blip in the whole journey, more or less, but just like being along for the ride is kind of like crazy. It's like, damn, like this shit is just like going, Yeah,
because we've worked with a lot of really, really cool clients, and we've done a lot of great work. And some of the stuff that really like touched me was like the Chispa project with Fluid and More. That was a beautiful shoot, and the content that came out of that was awesome. A lot of the work for General Motors was so like some of my favorite things to do because of the way that everything looked and the way that we interacted with the clients and got to build on top of that. To name some of the other clients that we had worked with from the early days, because I think I came in about a month or two after you. So we've both been here about the same time, about 3 years, and to start from those projects and to see how much we've grown and to see all the awards and then have my hands on some of the other projects and the bigger things, it's been like, it's like a comet, like going throughout the stars, and you're like, this is amazing.
It's not lost on me that a couple of the projects you mentioned were not projects that maybe generated the most press or attention at the company, but like you named projects that are personal to you or memorable to you because they might represent the first time you had an opportunity of that caliber, or you were stretched in some way, or you were relied upon in some way, from which you were changed, and so like, I think we all have those projects. It's not necessarily about the fame that they generate, but it's like, man, I contributed to that in a way that I've always aspired to attribute to work, and I've always sort of wanted people to you want to be tested, and it doesn't really count unless you're on the tightrope without a net under you. Unless like, hey, we're relying on you, and there's not that many people who work here, and we're asking you to do something. And if you don't do it, this thing is probably going to fail. And that's a lot to put on someone who is not particularly experienced, and especially when you're starting an agency. you rely on a lot of colleagues who don't bring a lot of necessarily experience to the table, where you're betting on something else besides their book and besides their past experience, which is a thing that I love. It's also not lost on me as you talk about the friendships you develop. Again, what could I learn from my previous experiences that I value that we could bring with a sense of intention to this company? And it's not lost on me that, man, I mean, advertising really ages in dog years. Things that seem so fly this year, you watch, like, we're 5 years old. That's a pretty new company, but I look at things that we made a year in the first year or two, and they feel 25 and 30 years old.
Yeah.
And so what that means to me is, while those things still have value, the value of the creative output itself is relatively fleeting. But I'm on a text chain with the people from the first agency that I worked at that I've now known for 20 years, and like, I didn't know then, when we were bar hopping and navigating our early careers together, I didn't know that 20 years later that these relationships would still be intact and they would take different shapes and forms. But like, the thing that lasts is the relationships that you make along the way. And while that may sound sappy, I mean, where else are you supposed to meet friends if you give a lot of yourself to your work? And also, it's a place where you're going to find, probably, if you're working at the right place, you're going to find a lot of like-minded people.
Yeah.
This is a place where, people bring their personal interests and their personal tastes, and we have former athletes and former musicians, and all of these people of incredibly varied backgrounds. And so it's probably one of my favorite things about this industry, is just that almost no one who's in this industry grew up wanting to be in this industry. Everyone wanted to be something else, and they studied something else, and they were passionate about something else. And then life happened and some pivot happened, and they brought those set of skills and that taste and that acumen into this. And what it creates, is this environment where you have all of these people, who bring this like very, dynamic and original, kind of pot of taste that we stir up and kind of feed back to our clients in the form of work we're proud of.
It's an industry that allows everyone's authenticity to like be real and then be involved in the creative.
I mean, at the right agencies, one thing that would bum me out when we'd interview people, there's one of our first employees is Michael Rankin, now, a very senior creative here, and like, Michael is a musician who writes his own music and plays all the instruments, like Prince. Like, in the evenings, he would like create albums where he's doing all the instrumentation and he's doing the vocals and he's putting it all together. And then like by day he would do advertising. But the advertising that he was doing was, he'd show up to work and there'd be like, a checklist of tasks to make things that were basically litter that would intrude on people's lives that they didn't want, And so by day he made these things that he wasn't particularly keen to show anybody, and then by night he exercised his actual creative interests. And again, as I go back to my lineage at Crispin Porter, and you find it at Wyden Kennedy, and you find it at Mischief, and you find it at Gut, and you find it at the best creative places, is like, whatever your creative outlet is, whether it is music or whether it is filmmaking or whether it is editing or whether it is social content like what you guys create, like, it's not to say this is the only place where you should bring it, but like, you shouldn't feel like the only time that you could exercise those passions is on the evenings and weekends outside of work. Actually, you want to create an environment where if you're bringing that to work, it's not only serving your personal interests, but it's serving the agenda of the agency simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
To that effect, because I know we're well over the 15 you gave us, so appreciate it. Got two more questions for you. So we talked about some of those.
Man, you said that like I gave you, like, we can talk as long as you want. Sorry, dude, I got 15 minutes.
I try to be mindful.
We're good.
So, favorite campaigns that you've done while you're here, and it could be across clients. I know a couple of those are gonna be Sprite.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I'll bring up. I'll answer the question, at the risk of like insulting other great work and other clients, but like, when we talked about your experience with Chispa and GM, well, it's not necessarily the brand or the creative output. It's like what it meant to you personally and where it found you at that kind of juncture of your life.
Yeah.
You know, for me as a child of hip hop and a child of the NBA, you know, I used to keep, you guys are too young to remember, before YouTube, if you wanted to rewatch things, you would just keep a VHS in and you'd have to hit record.
Yeah.
If a music video, if you wanted to see the Wu-Tang Triumph video, like you got to hit record, and, you know, and then it's on your killer tape. And my killer tapes from my youth are, you know, The Simpsons and In Living Color and Saturday Night Live and Yo MTV Raps and you know, Big Tigger in the Basement. And it's Nike ads and it's Sprite ads. Yeah. And before there was an internet, Sprite was a place where you could see Nas or Rakim or a Tribe Called Quest in maybe a slightly different context. And the fact that you lacked access to the artists and the athletes that you loved in the way that we have it today made them more mythic figures. They were harder to find, and you know, and like, you know, capturing cool footage of them was more of a treasure hunt. Yeah. I tell you that to say, like, I thought of Sprite ads and Nike ads in the same echelon as In Living Color and Saturday Night Live. You know, to me, it wasn't about commercials and sketch comedy and music videos. To me, it's just like, there's shit that's cool and there's shit that's not that cool. Yeah. And so fast forward to Sprite being such a foundational client for us, and part of what they like about working with us is that we know our history. We know our history because we didn't study it as marketers. We studied it as you know, as active members of pop culture. Yeah. And so how do you honor the legacy of the past? What can you learn from the past? But also, what made their past work so good was that it was unlike anything that came before it, and it defied the rules of marketing. So to honor the legacy of this past for Sprite, you have to make things that don't that don't play by the rules and don't repeat the past. I think a favorite for me within the context of Sprite would be the Hip Hop 50 work we did. And specifically, if you're really asking, like, the moment that I would like etched on my headstone, you know, so the spot is Rakim and Nas and Lotto performing. It's Rapper's Delight is kind of the vehicle, and they're performing famous bars from their own careers, and then bars from Rapper's Delight, and it becomes this very cool creative musical way to celebrate the 50th anniversary of hip hop by bridging the past and present and future of hip hop all in one film with Rapper's Delight, which was, like, you know, the song that started it all. No. Well, Nas didn't want to perform any bars from Rapper's Delight, and Nas did not want to perform any previous bars from his catalog. Okay. In order to agree to participate in the film, Nas's representatives were like, he needs to come in at the end, separate of the other artists. Respect to them, but we feel that Nas should have his own moment, and he should have an original bar that feels like it feels all encompassing and sort of summarizes the whole film. Okay, cool, let's do that. Whatever he wants to do to participate, great. Okay, well, here's the length of the bar that we have for him to rap, and, like, we would never dare to suggest what he should rap, but please God, let it be something that makes sense for the spot that we're trying to create. His representative said back to us, listen, don't suggest lyrics to Nas because he's Nas. Great. Fair. But what would be an example of sort of the length of lyric that you'd like to hear, and essentially sort of what you would want it to communicate? But don't suggest lyrics to Nas. He'll find that incredibly insulting. Okay. So we're thinking about this, and it's Rapper's Delight. And he had just had a new album that came out. This was 2022 or 3.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to the album, and just kind of in the middle of a really sort of fast-paced verse, he says something about, like, we're underground and overground. It didn't rhyme with anything. It was just kind of in the flow. And I was like, you know, that's a pretty interesting line. We're underground and overground. So I started there. The sort of suggested line for inspiration to him started with, we're underground and overground, keeping fans excited. And then you're like, all right, well, how do you sort of finish the spot and make sense of the whole thing and summarize it in the context of Rapper's Delight? So So what we suggested to him is we're underground and overground, keeping fans excited. 50 years and counting, y'all rappers delighted.
Yeah.
So I wrote that. I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty much, that's what we want him to do, however he wants to. Sent it to him. His rep wrote back. He's like, Nas saw this. He thinks it's really good. He's just going to do this.
Nice.
So if I die today, I wrote a bar that Nas was. I am Nas's songwriter.
Yeah, that's great.
And if that's the best I do in the time that this agency is in existence, whether it's 5 or 50 more years, that's enough for me, fellas.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
enough for me.
I mean,
that's good.
that's hard.
Good grain talk.
Dog, unless you have something, I have one more question. And mainly it's just about messages to the next generation, or even to the industry, just any words of wisdom or encouragement you have.
I mean, I think everyone is kind of looking for what is the secret formula for success, and then you start navigating your career and you realize like the secret isn't that much of a secret. For me, it's 4 ingredients. The first 3 are talent, persistence, and perseverance. Talent, in many ways, you can control. In other ways, you can't control, in so much as talent in advertising and specific, I think, to creative and strategists is like a great musician or like a great filmmaker. You are a lifelong collection of your influences that might blend together into something original or new. So I told you some of my influences growing up, but also my dad owned a country western bar for 40 years. So I love hip hop, but like there's also a whole 1970s outlaw country music side to me.
Amazing.
And there's actually interesting parallels between country music and hip hop once you listen to them both with an open mind.
Yeah.
But then there's other parts of talent that can be cultivated just through intention and interest. So there's talent. For what we do for a living, persistence and perseverance are so essential. 95% of what we create will never see the light of day. I get excited when I interview people who played competitive sports in at least high school, but maybe even college, because when I interview someone and they tell me they played competitive sports, yes, it lets me know they know how to be part of something bigger than themselves. They know how to, play a role and own a role and star in a role in something bigger than themselves. But maybe the most important reason I like former athletes is by growing up playing sports, you learn how to lose. We have to learn how to lose and get back up and keep going, and not get so dejected by failure that it affects, our ability to wake up tomorrow and come back with the same irrational enthusiasm that tomorrow will be different. So that persistence and perseverance, I think, in our industry is maybe more important than most. Being able to maintain an irrational optimism and not become cynical, which can be quite easy. And I think if you can have the first 3 ingredients of talent and persistence and perseverance and bring that to the everyday, then the 4th ingredient will happen on its own, but it's a mystical power, and it's an essential power called luck. So talent, persistence, perseverance, and luck. And I know every time I say luck, people go, yeah, but you create your own luck. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
Have you ever, met a girl that you thought you could be with for the rest of time, and everything was right except the timing? You were in different places in your life. Again, when I say how you do anything is how you do everything, what's true of how romantic relationships start is often true of how business relationships start and how client relationships start. Sometimes everything adds up except just the timing is not in your favor. In other instances, we've enjoyed a tremendous amount of luck where, everything was right and the timing was right, where someone said, you should meet my friend, and it's a client who, unbeknownst to us, we were exactly what they were looking for. That's luck. It's luck that we created by not folding up, at the first or second sign of adversity, so otherwise known as talent and perseverance. and leaning on our talent and bringing in a diverse and dynamic collection of talent so we have the right shot in the bag for any opportunity. But I think those are the 4 ingredients, and those add up to a successful career. And I will also tell you, when I interview people, I beware of those who don't mention luck as part of their journey of success. People who feel like, oh, it was all me. It's like, man, have respect for the power of luck.
Yeah.
Because, you can get unlucky. And when you're unlucky, you have to have the persistence and perseverance to keep going until all of it, when I called Shaq's representative, how could I have known that the response on the other line was, Shaq's, as you know, is very interested in marketing, and he's been waiting for someone to start an agency like this. And Shaq lives in Atlanta 9 months out of the year. It was important to Shaq that this agency be housed in Atlanta. We didn't know it would come, and your brother has directed Shaq in commercials for 10 years. We've been wanting someone who we can trust to partner with in such an endeavor. We didn't know you were going to call us, but we've been waiting for a phone call like this. I mean, that's just fucking lucky, right? Now, the luck was created through a series of events by which I left a pretty good job, and bluffed my way into backing my way in a corner where it's like, it didn't start as let's start a company. It started as like, I wonder if some cool established agencies across America would let me open an Atlanta chapter. And then all of a sudden, kind of step by step and conversation by conversation, it turned into, I think we're actually starting an agency. And if it fails, I can always crawl back to a holding company with my tail between my legs, and if it succeeds, who knows what success could look like. But for us, success has been this kind of, I think what this all adds up to, and it speaks to luck, is this kind of law of attraction, that what we're putting out and what intentions we're setting, it will find a future set of clients, who want what we have to offer, and now it's just an exercise in us finding each other.
Damn. Nah, that's a. I'm gonna end up unpacking that later. That's but ladies and gentlemen, Omid, thanks for taking the time. Those are just gems that honestly I feel like all of us need too. I always enjoy hearing stories from you, just so you know. And appreciate you being on the pod, man, for real.
Thank you, dudes.
As always, a pleasure.
Thank you.
As always, a pleasure.
This is Majority Report. We will catch y'all next week. Cheers to 5 years of Majority, 50 more at least in the pipeline. But man, we got some bills to pay. We got some meetings to get to. We will catch y'all next week.